everyone, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Arteza Real Brush Pens. Now all Arteza products that you're going to see in this video were sent to me for free for review purposes, but I was not paid for this review and the opinions are 100% my own. I'm not going to review something that I'm not going to use myself, and you'll see me continue to use all the products that I use in this video. Now, along with the Real Brush Pens, I have a few other Arteza products that they sent me to try out that correspond and kind of coordinate with these pens. The first is going to be the paper that I'll be using for all of the coloring and the stamping that I'm going to be doing today. That is the watercolor paper from Arteza. It comes in a 2-pack. This paper is 140 pounds. There are 32 sheets in each pad, and it has double sides to each paper, and it has a different texture on each side. So the first is a canvas texture, and then the opposite side is a very smooth surface to stamp on. That retails for $15.99. The next is the six pack of water brushes. These are awesome. You get 3 flat brush tips and 3 fine brush tips in this set. Each one of these holds 7 milliliters of water in them. Now a set like this is really fun to play around with because not only do you have these flat brush tips, which just make coloring in an entire background really easy and putting down large washes of color, you also get the fine point, which are great especially for if you're a stamper like I am, to fill in those really detailed stamped areas. Now to fill these up, it's very simple. You just need some water. I went ahead and put mine in with this little syringe. You can do that too. I did it this way because I wanted to be able to measure how much water these held, and it does hold 7 milliliters of water. Each one of these syringes is a milliliter of water. You just unscrew the cap, pop in some water right in the little barrel, put the cap back on, and then you just push where it says push, and you have water come out, and here is this nice wash of color that you get with this large flat brush tip. And it's just a really great product where you don't have to have a cup of water out on your desk at all times, especially if you're clumsy like me. This set of water brush pens retails for around $9 or $10. Now moving on to the Real Brush Pens, which is what I'm going to focus on the rest of the video. I have the 24 pack. These come in 4 different size pack. You have 12, 24, 48, and 96. I'm going to be using the 24 one today because that's what I was sent, but I would suggest getting a larger pack if you do go and buy these. I could get things done with the 24 pack. It comes with a great variety of colors, but just not being a color mixing expert, I think the 48 pack would give me more options without having to mix all those colors. Now these come packaged very nice. You first get them in this big plastic box, and then each plastic box has these little kind of sheets, plastic sheets, where the markers can pop in and out. Now you can store these in the packaging that they come in. I'm not going to do that. I have mine just in a cup. It is suggested that you store them vertically with the tips facing up. Now each pen comes with its own little cap. These are very portable and the cap fits right on the end. You have a color indicator on the bottom of the pen and on the top around the bristles. This is a real brush pen, so the tips on these is a real brush. The tip separates out. It's not like your Distress markers or your Tombos or your Marby markers. These have a real brush on the tip of these markers. Something new that they have added, they have listened to the complaints that I have seen beforehand. They have added color names and numbers. Here you can see in this photo where I have everything kind of labeled out. You do get that color name and number on there now. That one that I showed is the Sapphire Blue marker. It has a name on it now, and the color number is 131. So there is that great part of it now. The clear cap helps you see through, and there's a closer look at that brush tip. You can see the more pressure you put down, the wider kind of marks you get. And you really do get more of a watercolor and brush type of effect with this type of tip instead of your regular marker tip. Here's a cost breakdown of each one of the sets, how much they cost, and what you're paying per. You can buy these markers in two different places. You can buy them off of the Arteza website, which is the cheaper option, or you can buy them off of Amazon. Also, whenever you buy a larger set, you get the pens at a better price per pen. So you're paying a little bit less the more you buy, if that makes sense. And I do want to mention all the prices are in US dollars and they're only accurate at the time I'm posting this video. They fluctuate a little bit. So make sure you keep your eye out, watch for sales, that kind of thing. I'm going to do a little bit of blending to show you how you can blend these markers out. I have three different colors here. I've got the red, the neon pink, and the bubblegum pink. They're all in the same color family. And I am working on the canvas texture side of the Arteza watercolor paper. I started off with the red. I go right in with the neon pink, kind of halfway through the red, and start to blend it out just with back and forth strokes. The faster you move with these markers, the less product you're going to get out. The ink in them kind of releases on its own. You can't push them to get more ink out or anything like that. So you need to work a little bit slower with these if you want a solid form of color. The faster you write and the harder and more pressure you put down, the more the tip is going to separate out and you're going to get that more brush-like look. You're not going to get as solid of a surface area with the color. With these tips, you can get really fine lines, you can get really wide lines. It really is just about the amount of pressure, how fast, how slow you're coloring with them. So I would say with these markers, you have a little bit of a learning curve. If you've ever watercolored or used any type of brush pen, it's going to come a little bit easier. But if this is your first time working with something like this, give yourself some practice time. Don't go in with these and think it's going to be perfect the first time. Practice with them a little bit, play around on some scrap paper, just blend out some colors on their own, or just color in a quick image and work on it that way instead of going in the very first time and thinking you're going to get a perfect image. They have a little bit of a learning curve, but nothing extravagant or too hard to handle. I do want to say before I even did this review, I did play around with these quite a bit before I even formed an opinion on these. That's just what I came up with. The first time I colored with these, it didn't work out. Another thing you really want to make sure you are doing is using the right paper. These are not something that you can just throw onto regular cardstock and they're going to work. They soak into the paper, it doesn't work. You have to use either watercolor paper, like I'm using here, and then I've seen people say that you can use Bristol Smooth. I've never used that before, but a lot of people swear by it. So if you don't have good luck with watercolor paper, try that. Another great thing you can use these for is hand lettering. I am not a hand letterer by any means at all. My handwriting is terrible, but there's just an idea to show you that you can get some great letters and coverage. And again, the faster you write with these, the less color and the more skipping you're going to get, the more watercolor brush type look. Alright, one of my favorite tests to do when I'm blending is to go through rainbow order, see how good of a blend I can get with them. Here's a look at the colors I'm using, and I'm going to start out with red. I have speeded this up a little bit. I am not coloring this fast. I do like to use a slower hand with these. And when you're not getting a good blend like I just did, give it a little bit of time to kind of soak and meld together and let that liquid reactivate the color you've already put down. Switch back and forth between the colors a little bit, and that's going to give you a better blend. Here you can see the purple and the yellow. The first time I go over it, don't give you a great blend. Go back and work in. Let that yellow reactivate the orange a little bit, and then you'll get the better blend the second time. Same thing here. You just want to work back and forth between the colors. Now, these are real brush pens, so if you do happen to get a little bit of color, a darker color on a lighter color, just scribble it off and they're good as new. It's not going to damage the tip at all. That's another great way to do kind of an ombre look. I'll show you that a little bit later on. But just know that blending between two colors straight with the tip of the marker isn't going to ruin them. I'm finishing up with a little bit of that eggplant. I'm just blending back and forth between the blue and the purple until I get the blend that I want. You can layer these up and get darker colors if you want. Just remember that you have to be using a watercolor paper. If you go in with regular cardstock on these, you're going to get that pilling, you're not going to get blending. Make sure you're using the right products to make your products work the best. I'm also going to show you a blend between the black and all the grays that are in this 24 set. So I'm starting off with my darkest color, and then I'm working to my lightest just by going in and blending in between the two a little bit, just with the tip of the brush. I'm not using any water at this point. I've got my last color there, and it blended out beautifully with my grays as well. Now, blending out with water is also an option that's going to give you more of a watercolor look, and it's going to soften things up instead of that very dark, intense color. So I'm putting down a little bit of that eggplant purple. Then I'm taking one of my water brushes. This is the smallest of the fine tip brushes. I just put a little bit of water out and just pull out the color until I get it as light as I want it. You can almost go into white if you wanted to. And that's a great way to really stretch out your markers. I thought I would also show you with a lighter color. So here is that bubblegum pink color. I'm going to first scribble down a little bit of color, and that would be where I would want the color the darkest, and then I'll come in with that brush tip. I have cleaned it off just on a clean paper towel, and then I drag it out with a little bit of clean water until I get it as light as I want it. Now you can also pick color up with these brushes, and you can mix color on a palette to get more colors and get kind of more life out of your pens. So I put down a little bit of red and yellow to make an orange color, and then I just pick it up with a water brush. You want to scribble it down on a slick surface. You can use acetate. I'm using this little kind of baking sheet. It's a very small one that a crafty friend sent me. And there is also, you can laminate a piece of cardstock and use that. I use that a lot as well as a palette. And then you just want to scribble the color down, pick it up with your water pen or a paintbrush, a water brush, and put the color down that way. That's going to give you a lighter wash of color, and it's also going to be a little bit more transparent and more watercolor-like. You can also use your water brush pens and these to kind of create a wash of color over an entire background. So I've scribbled down some blues. I have put some water already on my paper just with that large flat brush, and then I'm just using a larger fine brush tip, picking up a little bit of that color and dotting it in. This is going to allow that color to spread out and blend just like it would with any watercolors that you might have. And it blends out into this gorgeous wash of color that you can make kind of the background of stamped images and things like that. Now I know a lot of times these markers are compared to the Zig Clean Color Real Brush. I have never used those, so I can't tell you how well they compare to those. All I can tell you is my experience with these, and I had a lot of fun playing around with these. Here I took that extra ink that was on my palette, spritzed it with a little bit more water, and then smushed it down to create a smushing background. Another thing that I've already mentioned but I didn't show you how to do is picking up some color, and this is more of an ombre look. You can do it with your hand lettering. You can do it if you just want to create a fun ombre background. So I scribbled some orange down on my palette. Then with my yellow brush, I picked up a little bit of that orange, and it gives you this great ombre look that just kind of the orange wears out as you use the marker more, and it's a gorgeous effect. You can also do that with your colored images, and they don't have to be in the same color family. Here I scribbled down a little bit of purple. Then with that bubblegum pink, I'm going to pick up that purple color and just scribble off the purple. You can go back in and layer this up until you get the intensity that you want, and it's a gorgeous effect. So a lot of different things you can do with these markers. One thing I have seen online that people are suggesting to do, I wanted to show you why I don't suggest doing this, and that is dipping the tip of the marker in a cup of water and using it to watercolor that way. Whenever you do that, the water sucks out the color almost, and it pulls out more water into the marker and it dilutes the color. Just by 10 seconds with my little brush in the water, I swirled around the top because it all kind of combines on the top, but you can see how much ink that pulled out. That's going to wear down your markers even more. The same people that had suggested doing that had said their markers ran out relatively quickly. That's why. So that's not something I would suggest doing. If you're fine buying markers more often, by all means you can do it that way. I would just suggest picking up the color off a palette, and if you want a more watercolor look, doing it that way. So a few pros and cons of these markers. These I found they worked and they colored beautifully for me after I got over that initial learning curve. There are tons of techniques I can use these for, being a stamper and crafter. If you're just using these for coloring, they work great. If you want some more techniques you can do for these are awesome to do some with, and I'm going to share some with you in just a moment. Now, after you get over that learning curve, it only took me about a day. They're easy to use. I have used watercolor brushes before, never with the brush tip, but I found them pretty quick and easy to learn how to use. This is very quick coloring. You can go more in depth and layer up more colors if you want, but for me, I like to do some quick coloring sometimes, and these are awesome for that. Another thing, if you travel a lot or you go to a lot of crops, a lot of stamping retreats, these are a great portable option, and these are cheaper than your other brush tip markers on the market. How well they compare, I can't tell you that because I've never used the other kind, so that's something you'll have to go and search for on your own if you want the answer to that. The only con that I found with this is these markers are not sold individually. So there are going to be colors I use more often than other ones. So in order to replace those, I'm going to have to go and buy a whole new set. Now maybe they're going to come out with individual markers at some point, but right now they are not sold individually. What makes me think they might, though, is a lot of complaints at the beginning whenever these markers first went on the market is the color name and the number, no identifying numbers or colors were on the marker at first. The company that makes these products did listen to those complaints, and they went ahead and they added the color names and the numbers onto the markers. So now you have that option of being able, especially for a video maker like me, to be able to put the colors and the numbers on the screen as I'm coloring along. If you want to color along with me, it makes it a lot easier for me. And if I want to go and recreate something, I know which colors I went and used, so I can pull out those numbers. It's also great for a swatch sheet, so I don't have to try out, will this color work with this color each and every time. I wanted to show you a few little things that I did while I was playing around with these markers. While I was playing around with these markers the first time, I went ahead and stamped out my images and colored them in. So just when I say these are pretty easy to learn how to use, this is my first time coloring in a whole image with them. So it's not that hard to learn how to use these, I promise. Once you get over that initial learning curve, things just come together beautifully. This is another technique that I tried first, just as I was playing around with them. You can see my smudges around it. This is by no means perfect, but it was very easy and quick to do. This is just coloring on a stamp, a solid stamp, and stamping it in with the color from these markers. So easy to use. I'm going to show you more on that in a little bit. What I wanted to share with you first is some coloring with these markers. Now, if you are a stamper and a crafter like I am, a few things that you might want to know with this: you need to use a waterproof ink, or you need to use heat embossing. I've already went over the types of paper you need to use, but just in case, you do need a watercolor paper, or some people suggest Bristol Smooth. I can't suggest that myself because I've never used it before. Watercolor paper worked fine for me, but you need to play around with what is going to work best for you and your style of coloring. I'm using the Arteza watercolor paper that I showed at the beginning of this video. For one of these stamped images, I'm going to be stamping with waterproof black dye ink, and the other one I'm going to go ahead and stamp with the VersaFine black onyx ink. This is waterproof on its own, but this is my favorite way to heat emboss. Heat embossing with watercolor is just going to keep all those colors kind of in it, creates a little well, so you can go in and color a little bit quicker and your colors won't run together. I stamped 2 of these panels because I'm going to be coloring them in 2 different ways. The first panel I'm going to blend out only with markers, so no water is going to be involved. This is going to be all color from the markers. My second panel, I will be using only one marker, and then I'll blend it out with some water just to show you the different looks you can get with these markers. The first colors I'm using, I'll be putting all the colors down at the bottom of the screen as I'm using them so you know which colors are what and what I'm using to blend between the 2 of them. The first colors were a little bit too far in between each other, the oranges. So what I did was, to get my shadow, I scribbled on a little bit of that darker color on my little craft mat off to the right hand side. I picked it up with my lighter color and scribbled that on first, then blended it out as I went over to the right hand side. That allowed me to get in that shadow with 2 very different kind of oranges, but they blended together beautifully still. The only colors that I really had trouble with were a little bit of the purple. What happened was I think the color is just really intense. So to get these to blend together, you need to put quite a bit of color down. More so when I blended with water, you really need to go and you need to add some water. Give it a little bit of time to soak into that color and then blend it out. But it can be done. It turned out nice. That was just my only problem color, and that's just because there was so much pigment in there. I went ahead and used some blues and greens on that other little ice cream cone in the center, and I'm coming back and using some chocolate brown and a darker coffee color. Now to blend these out is very simple. I just start off with the darkest color, and then I come in with my lighter one and blend between the 2. It's really that simple. I also used a little bit of fair skin on the popsicle sticks, and I added in a little bit of that chocolate color here and there to add little shadows. For the ice cream cone, I'm starting off with the chocolate color, putting this down where the shadows would be the darkest, and then just to lighten it up a little bit, instead of blending it all out with the chocolate color, I came in with a little bit of that fair skin color. Mixing the 2 on the paper really allowed me to get a darker color that I just didn't have to blend out, and it just worked out really well blending between the 2 on the paper. I'm doing the same thing with a little bit of orange right on the edges of the yellow. That's going to give me a darker yellow color that I just don't have in this set. Like I said before, the 24 set, for a stamper like me who isn't great at blending and coloring, who isn't great at mixing colors, I think a 48 set is probably going to be better for someone like me. If you're great at blending colors and you can do that, great. You don't need as many colors. They blend together beautifully. You can blend them on a palette, you can blend them on paper, but I think 48 set with more colors would be more beneficial if you are a stamper like me. Moving on, I'm going to now be using the same exact colors that I used before on this page that I went ahead and stamped and I heat embossed. The only thing I'm doing different is, instead of blending between 2 colors, I'm going to use the water to blend everything out. This is going to give it a lighter effect, and it's also going to give it more of a watercolor effect. So in the panel that I've already colored in, you've got these really intense, gorgeous colors and very bright and vibrant. With the watercolor look, you almost get more softer pastel colors, and it's just 2 different looks with one product. I'm using the same blue that I used beforehand. Just blending this out gave it more of a wash of color instead of that very intense blue. Now this is where I came into a little bit of trouble. That purple has a lot of pigment, so blending it out is just a little tricky if you are not a very good watercolor like I'm not. It gets a little tough to blend out, but it turned out gorgeous. You just have to work with it a little bit more. I also went ahead and added some on the sides and the bottom, and then I went in and did my greens. Now the reason I'm switching back and forth between the 2 is because when one color is wet, they can bleed between the 2. It does help having the embossing on there, but just better safe than sorry. I give it a little bit of time to dry in between each colors. That way I don't run into all the colors bleeding together. I went ahead and added some brown to the top of the little ice cream cone, and I'm going to come back in and do these in the exact same order. So I'm moving on to the ice cream cone at this point. I use that same chocolate color and I'm just blending out with the water brush. The great thing about embossing on this, if you get a little bit too much color like I did on here, it kind of wells up in the embossing. It doesn't run everywhere. So I can come back in with my water brush. I just took all the water out of the tip, soaked up some of that extra color and extra pigment that was just a little bit too much on there, and I could draw up the color from it. So kind of lighten it up essentially. It was a really fun technique to use. I'm coming in with a little bit of red on that. I don't know what these are. Push pops. We used to eat these all the time as kids, the Flintstone ones. I added a little bit of red to the packaging, and finally I'm finishing off with a little bit of yellow. I did turn these two panels into cards. I will have a video up of that. Um, I created them both, so I had two cards ready to go with these two panels. I will have a video on that soon enough, and you can check that out when it's up. Another thing that I tried with these markers is some smushing and really layering up pigments. This is like 4 layers of color, so these layered up very nicely. This is about my 5th time smushing over new colors to really get that vibrancy. This turned out beautiful as well, so smushing is another technique you can use these for. Something else that I really love with these markers is you can color directly on the stamps themselves. You can do this 2 different ways. You can just color on the stamp and stamp it down like I'm doing here. You don't get as good of a blend doing it this way, but that may be the look you're going for. You can also color directly on the stamps, and because these are watercolor brushes, they have a water-based ink in them, you're gonna get some reaction with water. So I scribbled on some color, same as I did before. I've got some clean water in my spritzer. I gave it a few light mists of water and I stamped that down, and you've got this gorgeous ombre Christmas tree ready to be put together. So this has a few other little elements you can do to create these little, oh, they're just little Christmas trees that you can put on like your counter and stuff and things like that. But it has this little stick that goes through them, so I scribbled on some brown, and on one I just went in straight with dry ink. The other one I gave it a few spritzes of water. The one with the water does show up a little bit darker, but again, these are just 2 different looks you can use to get 2 different types of looks for your cards. I'm switching between 2 browns for the base of these little trees, one without any water. This had a little bit of texture to it, I think just from air bubbles under the stamp, which is a neat look. And then on this one, I'm going to just spritz it with a few spritzes of water and stamp that down. This is the technique I used before when I had my little pot of flowers that I tried that with. That one turned out beautiful. There's a look at both of those little Christmas trees and 2 different looks. You can also kind of combine these two. So I'm starting off with some black dye ink that is waterproof. I've stamped down my little flower pot. I'll put in my little stick that tells you the name of the flower, or your garden marker, I guess is what it's called. And I have some masks that I've already created for these images. I've used this stamp before. So I have my masks ready to go. I'll place those over my stamped images. Then I'm going to be using 2 different colors of green, crocodile green and green tea, and I'm just switching back and forth between the two. I gave it a few spritzes of water, and I'm going to stamp that down right over the top of the flower pot. I'm going to come back in and stamp a few more of these, switching between the 2 greens, giving it some spritzes of water and stamping it down to fill up that flower pot. Then I'm going to add a few little grass sprigs right along the bottom. I just need to mask off my little flower pot. I've got some green. This is a different shade of green. I gave it a few spritzes of water again, stamp that down along the flower pot. Then I can remove my mask, come in with my little, it says time, which is what I stamped into the pot. Then I just need to add my sentiment. Finally, I'm going to come in with some of those markers, scribble down some color very quickly. This is the burnt orange, I believe is what it's called, or maybe rust orange. I'll leave what they're called down in the bottom of the video screen. And then I just use my water brush to blend that out very quickly. I've got some Dolphin Gray. This is a lighter gray, and then I'll come in with a darker one, Smoke Gray, and again blend between the two to color in that garden marker. Now this panel is done completely, sentiment at all. I can just mat this and put this on a card. It's that simple and easy to do. So there are just a few of the techniques you can use these for if you are a card maker or stamper like me. And coming up, I will have some more in-depth videos on different techniques you can use these for, because even though these products were sent to me, I have to say that I really like them and I enjoyed using them a lot. I have to say I really enjoyed playing around with these and finding new and different techniques you can use them with. I had a lot of fun with them. I would highly recommend them if you don't have something like this already. That is going to do it for me today though. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. There are going to be a few different links on the left side of your screen you can click on. As always, thank you guys so much for watching and happy crafting.